below you. A question I have for you, Laura, is we're both based in Manhattan, and I have a lot of clients who purchase apartments in skyscrapers, which for me, not my thing. But 3 years ago, I worked in this. It was supposed to be the highest tower in Manhattan. It's not anymore. 432 Park, and my client had an apartment on a 96th floor. And when I would get in the apartment, I would feel some sort of unease in my body. And I wasn't sure what it was about, but now every time I step in a skyscraper for a client, I try to clear that energy because I do feel some sort of contraction. What is the science on a Feng Shui perspective backing being disconnected, not disconnected, but far from the ground?
That's a good question. So it would also kind of jump back into the world of dowsings. So what I understand and I've learned over this period of time, that if a person is higher up in elevation, they tend to have a stronger response if they're very sensitive to the energy of whatever is happening on the earth plane. And you can even measure, like with water veins, for example, how high is the impact, the negative impact going to be felt, right? And then in terms of Feng Shui perspective, especially in apartment buildings, because you're going to be sandwiched right to the left or right, front and back, above and below. So if your neighbor is kind of radiating not the best energy frequency, depending on what's happening, there is a potential that it can go up, out, back down, around, right? All that stuff. So it is something to keep in mind. And just to share a quick example, I had one client where she didn't have like a resident beneath her. What she had was a huge AC unit. And every time she went into the room, she was very sensitive. She was like,
vibration.
She's like, I feel like I'm falling. And she would keep repeating it. And then when she described, this is what's below this actual room, the fan sucking and pulling, right? All that stuff. I was like, interesting. So here's an example of going against the principles of Feng Shui. So Feng Shui 101 will say in the bedroom, you don't want to have anything underneath the bed because you want the energy to flow nicely. But because of what's beneath her, basically just air and then the AC, I basically went against it and I said, what we're actually going to do is bring books into the room, but they're going to be very particular because the area, it's all coming back now, the area where that room was located was in the northeast. So in a foundational way, that is the element for mountain or earth. And so I said, let's see what books you have. Let's just use what you have that relate to spirituality, because that's what that area could translate as, self-care, hiking, nature, mountains, anything of a positive reference. And in this case, actually place them under the bed because the intention is to recreate a foundation beneath you. So she did some other stuff as well, but that was the biggest thing. And she did all that and then reported back. I noticed that when I'm in the room, I don't have that sensation anymore. And I can actually sleep extremely comfortably. And I enjoy being in the room now versus constantly wanting to run out. Now, is there any science to back that? Right now, there's not. It's only what she had with her experience and what was prescribed based in that moment of what she was sharing, feeling, then overlapping with the direction and overlapping with the main element. And then finding resources that we could use within the space that would help replicate Earth and basically fill the gap of what she was feeling.
That's an exception, but yeah, as you said, when I refuse, my client is king, but I will always refuse, and once I explain why, to put beds with storage. People love the idea of putting storage under your bed. I'm like, no, I'm not making you sleep on your belongings. That is not under my watch. So
Yes.
let's jump into part 3. Did you want to say anything about that, Laura?
No, I think we gave plenty examples. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to talk now about colors and the 5 elements.
Okay. So yes, just going back and forth with your expertise in interior design. So I'm just going to give a quick roll call of the 5 elements, what they are, and then how they can easily be represented, and then a quick story of how we use them. So essentially the 5 elements are going to be water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. And just to quickly elaborate, earth and wood are not the same, okay? And I totally get it. A lot of people get confused with that. So we'll just start with that. Wood element is relating to plants, anything that's growing in a vertical direction. And yes, there are some plants that grow downward, but just accompany wood element with real living, thriving plants, greenery, stuff like that, okay? And the reason this is important is because wood element is the most active element. Well, it's not the most, I'll take that back, but it's definitely moving in that direction. It is considered the athlete of all elements. It is the go-getter, right? So what I'm basically saying is these elements also have characteristics. So if a person says, oh, I'm feeling like really low energy, or, I'm not as motivated, then having wood element by your side on a general conversation is something we would recommend bringing in, because it's saying that element is reaching for the sun. It wants to go as high as it possibly can, and you'll see that mimicked in nature. So the characteristics that are quickly being described have been observed over time. So this isn't just made up. It's through base observations of how nature is interacting with itself when it's in different cycles. So wood element, accent colors can be green. Keep it really simple, okay?
Which is confusing for a lot of people because they think earth is green, but earth is actually brown. Correct me if I'm wrong. We'll get into that.
Yeah, so I'll do earth next, because earth essentially is dirt, okay? If you want to be all dramatic, you can basically think of earth like worms. They're eating the earth, they're recycling it, and that's the energy that earth provides. Like if you go walking in nature, you're doing a meditation, again, maybe even with Reiki, they'll usually say, now ground the soles of your feet to the earth and give any worries and anxieties away. They do that because that's the nature of earth, is to basically take what you don't need and then transmute it into something brand new and recycle that energy so that actually feeds the plant, right? So there are different ways you can approach it. But in terms of earth, you can also think of it as a mountain that's very sturdy. The energy of earth/mountain is all about helping you feel poised and grounded. Does it mean you're completely still? No, it doesn't. But what it is saying is, even when things are not going your way 100%, you can balance and rebalance yourself fairly quickly. So that would be the importance of earth, and the accent color of earth would be, in general, just yellow. There's more colors, but that's the general starting point.
So what you're saying is someone who needs some grounding, if they feel like they can't make decisions, or there's too much happening and they're panicking, maybe they need more earth energy in their home, and that can be translated by an element, anything, an object, a plant, not a plant, some art, or a pillow that is yellow.
Yeah, again, because you can even say, okay, we're not going into all the details, but what else can represent earth, since we're on this topic, or energy? It could be shapes, right? So square could be the square pillow. It could be a square pillow with the design or outline of an earth mountain on it. Or you can say, who as a human being embodies the qualities of Mother Earth or Gaia? maybe the Dalai Lama, maybe it's a prayer, maybe it's a certain bohemian design, right? So you start to look at the environment in that context. Maybe it's a crystal or a stone, and then you can go even further and say, okay, let me research how am I feeling, or what body part or what chakra needs support. And then you're going down the rabbit hole. So it just keeps going and going. But the other way you can approach it is say, what's the atmosphere of the house? Is it organized? Is it balanced? Because that's the other thing. If you have a lot too much earth, right, in the house, it can feel very heavy, very weighed down. The emotion could then maybe turn into depression or guilt, right? So we're using, because a lot of these principles are being borrowed from traditional Chinese medicine. So this isn't just made up. These are years, if not centuries, of observation and alchemy of refining all these conversations. So that's why these elements play an important role. And sometimes, just to be fair, yellow might not be the appropriate. Maybe you need to tone it down even more. Maybe it needs to be more beigey or cream color, right? But that's to be decided once you're in the space. So again, what we're sharing is uber general, and you don't know until you're in the space and you're in the presence of the person that's requesting the support.
So you're saying there's a science behind it, but it is also subjective on what the energy of grounding will feel like for that specific person, and it can be different from one individual to the other.
Exactly. So that's why when people might go online or even listening to this or reading, they'll say, oh, the art and science of Feng Shui. The science can come from the astrology. The science can come from the compass, right? And those aspects of the conversation. But then the art, like an artist, you're interpreting the information that you're receiving, whether it's intuitively or what you're reading on the chart or what you're seeing in front of you. And so like an artist, you have to make decisions to say what's going to balance the alchemy of the person, of the space. And sometimes it's not just the space, it's the decisions of the person, how they're choosing to communicate. So you can say, oh, maybe we wear certain colors to encourage the subconscious and the emotions to simmer down. Or maybe they're too simmered down and we have to actually raise the volume up a bit more. But you won't know until it's actually implemented.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So let's see. So we did wood element, which is plants. We did earth, which is mountains, crystals, stones, and rocks. Then we'll get into metal. And just because I know there are probably some people who are also well-versed in Feng Shui, we're not going in any particular order. So we're just kind of randomly approaching it. Metal element is going to be accent colors of grays and whites, just keeping it simple. And the characteristic of metal element is they love to be very organized. So that's a good quality, but sometimes it can go overboard at the same time. And that element is also encouraging clear communication and also having an even view on situations. So they'll say, okay, this is like the justice of elements, saying weigh the balance ratio, if you will. How can we represent it in a more tangible way? It could be honestly anything made of metal. Metal statue, metal leg attached to the table, metal picture frame. My favorite personally is a singing bowl. That's my go-to. So you can play with singing bowls, and that's a great way, right? We offer vibrational healing, sound healing, as many people are becoming more familiar with. Again, what you bring in can be customized depending on who you are, your personal taste, the function of the room, what's your intention, who's living there. It goes on and on. So that would be metal. Then we have water element. So water element, very simple, actual water, little fountain. Sometimes it's not always appropriate, so you can do images or wall colors if it works for you. You don't have to.
Mirrors as well, right? If you can't do water.
What was that?
Mirrors as well, if you can't do water.
So mirrors are interesting, and I've been trying to research more about this in terms of the elemental representation. So I want to give it a fair conversation, because with mirrors, how I was taught, mirrors can go back and forth between metal element and water element. However, there's other sources out there that will say, because of the material of how the mirror is made, they'll
it's earth.
Yes, they'll line it up with earth, right? So even for myself, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I myself am experimenting with this, right? But I want to be fair as much as we can. So you could do that. And then in terms of, let's say, representation visually, like fish, sailing ships, things like that. And I'll just
the ocean.
The ocean. And I'll just put this out there, minor detail, but worth noting. If you get an image that is of a sailing boat, just to keep it simple, or swimming fish, you want to make sure the direction in how they look in the painting is moving into the house versus moving out. So
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, even that's directing. So Feng Shui will even play with directional items, visuals, how things are facing or pointing. And that's even the landscape, because really if you have access to the land, that's where you start first, and then you'll jump inside. But for apartment dwellers, we just start with the inside, but we still observe what do you see and what do you not see that could be affecting the space as well. And then we'll wrap this topic up with fire element. Very easy to represent. Honestly, if you can do real, that's better. So real candles or tea light candles, always be safe. Warm colors, it could be traditional red, but you can also go any spectrum of warmth, if you will.
Orange.
And the characteristic when fire element is balanced is the person themselves is super warm and they'll light up the room. So that's something to think about, and you don't need a lot of that element. It can even be by opening the windows and letting natural sunlight filter into your house, right? A simple habit. So those would be examples of the 5 elements.
And so to connect the 5 elements with also what we're supposed to do in our home, it's each room has to be balanced with all those 5 elements you talked about, correct?
Yeah, so you could start, I'll be honest, it can be overwhelming if you're not used to the language and the symbols and everything we're just touching upon. So I would say if you want to start off, what you could do is you could grab a compass. It could be maybe something like this. This is old school, a hiking compass, or some people might use their phone. Honestly,
I use my phone.
Yeah, I'll use both. I always have this on backup just in case the Wi-Fi is messing with it, the phone. And you want to make sure that the compass is on magnetic north, whether it's this or your phone. And then you find the center point of your home to the best of your ability, and you'll hold the compass about waist height. Make sure jewelry's off so it doesn't mess with the frequency. And then just keep it simple. It will tell you where north, south, east, west, and so on, where those areas of the home are. And each of those sectors, and you can just Google Bagua map and you'll compass Bagua map and you'll find where all the sectors are and all the elements, how they line up. So for example, the east is wood element. The northeast is mountain earth element. The north is water element, and so on and so forth. And then you can take a look and assess and say, do I have anything that will acknowledge the primary element to get the ball rolling? Again, there's more to this, but at least you can begin to exercise your Feng Shui eyes and seeing the world and the environment a little bit differently. And then you can overlap that, just learning what was learned now. What's the characteristic? What's the emotion? How is that relating to the people in the house? How is that relating to me? So I always recommend start by the front door, because that's called the mouth of Qi, And that's where everything will first enter into the house. The people, the emotions,
all the energy.
thoughts. Yeah. And that's it. That's a great place to begin. And if you happen to have access to make changes to the outside of the front of the house, that's also a great place to make changes as well.
And so people understand why we're doing all this, why I put the 5 elements, etc. We're former animals, so we're meant to be in nature, and we got out of nature and we're in these big buildings and these apartments, and so we're trying to recreate this natural habitat that we used to have, so we don't feel completely disconnected from the natural world, which is why we're trying to do all this.
Yeah, and it's that, and helping you to just reconnect to the simplicity of life. I know that sounds so corny and whatever, but there's a lot of truth to that, because we're in a world of instant gratification, go, 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 no rest. You know, is too much. Like, people are, you know, going a little nutsy right now. So we just need to calm down, take a breath, and really the environment that you're going home to after work, or socializing, or even if you're in the park or whatever, you had an amazing vacation. The idea is that this is like a recharge station for you, where you can feel secure, you could just be yourself, you could do what you need to do, even if you have multiple people in the house. So Feng Shui can offer a different form of setting up structure for one another, setting up positive, healthy boundaries for one another, and also getting to know the personalities and the traits. Oh, okay, that person is, you know, I know they have a hot temper. So maybe there's certain things we can have in the space to encourage calming that down.